This is a short follow-up to our conversation at the end of class last night on the Peshkin article, and also a little bit of review about the idea of iterative analysis and the way that when writing up qualitative data, the role of the author in representing the information that was generated as part of the data collection process. Okay, if you remember from last semester, you should have talked about the idea that analysis being an iterative process from the very beginning of your project to the point of writing up. Analysis begins from the very first hunches you bring to your topic, the ways you form your first questions, the decisions you make to proceed. It's not just the article talks about a priori knowledge. It's not just your opinions, it's also the perspectives that you bring from your training, from the literature you've read in preparation for the project, everything that went into getting started. And it continues throughout the process, the process of generating data. The analysis continues, and you may have written what some people call analytic memos along the way as you journal your fieldwork, your research process, or in your field notes, if you call them that. If you didn't make any analytic memos or analytic notes, you were thinking them, you just didn't write them down. So where do all those beginning hunches and a priori assumptions go when you go to do your work? How do you avoid feeling like you're reading into the data? Sometimes you'll hear people talk about qualitative research as being something where, well, you have no assumptions, you just go into the field and you're a blank slate and you collect the data and you don't have any influence on it. Well, of course that's not true. We know that all researchers have subjectivities. Even the quantitative researchers designing a survey are putting in assumptions into those design decisions. So we step away from the idea that there is no subjectivity, embrace the subjectivity, and then move to what Peshkin and Stake are calling this postponement of judgment. Let's go to the reading and look at it that way. Okay. Peshkin cites Stake talking about this, the idea of the postponement of judgment as being the ways that a naturalistic researcher or a qualitative researcher assumes that they don't enter the site empty-headed. They begin their studies with notions of what is out there that might be found, and as well with subjective dispositions that will bear on what they see and what they make of what they see. And this is not a bad thing. The idea of a monk-like vow of postponement or of holding back any opinion, it doesn't square with Peshkin's sense of reality, nor with mine. But what you are doing is bracketing those ideas and making sure that you understand them. And one way to do that, as Peshkin is pointing out, is by giving them a name, by naming your assumptions, and he does it in using the form of title. There'd be other ways of doing it. He goes on to say that by giving it a name, by taking his assumptions and his analytic frameworks, that his working hypotheses and so forth, and giving them titles, also helps him with focusing. And as he puts it, the finding a good title is not just about the intent of communicating the research to others. It's more immediately significant for the continuing collection and analysis of data is the fact that by knowing the point of my narrative, I am able to direct and shape my work in the most efficacious way. Then I can more or less settle down and attend less to the wide range of possible leads that claim my attention and concentrate more on pursuing a point or two of particular promise. This is what we were talking about in class when we were talking about the concept maps and having to pull out prioritize the areas that you most want to talk about. As Peshkin goes on to say, the compulsion to identify the tale I most want to tell presses me to search among my experiences as a participant observer, sorting out what I mean to establish as central from what thereafter will become peripheral. For those of you who are concentrating more on interview data than participant observation, the same thing is true. In interview data, we have to make decisions about what is the most important question, what are the most important kinds of narratives that you want to help the person who's participating in your data share with you, and what kinds of stories, what kinds of explanations, what kinds of descriptions are most central. So in this description, Peshkin is helping us see how he uses titling, the labeling of his a priori assumptions and his ongoing iterative analytic ideas as a form also of structuring the work that he does and helping him narrow things down and identify priorities. This is a meta-analytic process that is kind of a necessary way of helping him organize his project. We tend to think of analysis as coding and looking at the data and making sense of the data, and we'll talk about that later in the semester. But this ongoing meta-analytic process is important. Peshkin helps us see how he uses the a priori knowledge and how it helps to give him focus. He also, in doing so, openly acknowledges that the data he uses are generated or collected by him, by the choices that he makes, rather than just found waiting out there for him, and that his choices are his preferences, that there is a subjectivity to that, but of course it's done in a professional, rigorous way, and that's that kind of fuzzy area that is always hard to explain to people who don't do this kind of research. So finally, in his conclusion, Peshkin talks about how giving it a name, how using this titling process is a form of problem finding. And to finish up relative to the last bit of conversation we were having in class about the differences between qualitative and quantitative research and the purposes of the research, finding the problem, the question, the thing we don't yet understand or fully comprehend is the core of exploratory or critical research. It's the getting inside the black box to find out why is something occurring the way that it's occurring. What are the tensions that are complicating this social situation that it has an effect on the outcomes? We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what happens inside social situations ahead of time. So in the end, our a priori assumptions that would go into the research, or the sure knowledge that you have when you go into your research, becomes undone by the process of analyzing and this meta-analytic process of constantly questioning, what is it that I now know? How do I know it? Remember that a title always has a verifiability to it, in addition to being something that fits with what the author is trying to accomplish. We develop rather than test hypotheses in qualitative research, which makes it a nice first step for a mixed method approach, which some of you are interested in. It can also be a second step to get inside the black box when a quantitative study has revealed there's something going on, but we don't know what it is. So that's one of the ways that the qualitative and quantitative work can be blended together in order to develop and test hypotheses as a two-step process. For those that aren't doing mixed method or only doing qualitative research, the idea of opening questions is in itself a good project. To end with Peshkin, as he says, problem finding is another designation for the process of title seeking, whereby the tentative and unfocused give way to the certain and focused. So hopefully in your projects, you'll be starting to feel like you're getting to the certain and focused. And we'll continue the conversation. Thanks, and I will see you next Wednesday.